Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Google Forms for Online Assessments. This session is part of a series of free webinars offered every month by the Stark Portage Area Computer Consortium, or SPARC for short. SPARC is an information technology center up here in Northeast Ohio where we support about 30 school districts. However, this webinar is open to everyone, and we'd like to welcome all the people who've joined us live today or are watching this recording in the future. My name is Eric Curts, and I'm a tech integration specialist here at SPARC, and I will be your presenter for today. I also run the website controlaltachieve.com, where a lot of the resources we'll be looking at today are linked in. Definitely check that out, and definitely feel free to connect with me on Twitter as well. Happy to connect with folks. This session today, the resources will be found at tiny.cc/spark246. Now, if you're watching the live video, you're probably already on this webpage, but if you've come across this in the future, recorded on YouTube, and you're looking for the resources that we're referencing throughout the session, again, tiny.cc/spark246. That will take you out to this webpage where you'll see the embedded video as well. It's live now, but will be recorded there in the future. And below there, you will see some linked resources that will be referencing throughout the session. There's also a live session chat document. I would encourage folks to jump in that if you're watching this live. It's a great place to be able to ask questions, share ideas, connect with others, and chat during this session. Below there is a link to a session evaluation. We always love to get your feedback. Appreciate you filling that out when you get a chance. And finally, hey, you should get some credit for this webinar as well. At the very bottom of that page, there's a link to a session quiz you can take to prove that you'll watch the webinar, and upon doing so, it will generate a PDF certificate of attendance for 1 contact hour and email that to you, especially for those of you whose schools allow you to turn in hours for webinars and such. This is a great way for you to get credit for watching this training. All right, fantastic. So what are we going to be talking about here today? Well, this session is on using Google Forms for online assessments. We're going to be talking about, very briefly, why it's good to do online assessments and why Google Forms is a good tool for that. Then we'll take some time to actually create a quiz from scratch, talk about how to deploy that quiz, and of course, then how to have it auto-graded. Now, you may say, Eric, didn't you already do some webinars on Google Forms for assessments in the past? You are correct. For those who've been following us for a while with our webinars, if I go to the main webinar recording page where you'll find all of our previous webinars, we've got quite a number of them there. There are 2 that we've done in the past that dealt with online assessments with Google Forms. Now, I've marked each of those as old version. And the reason is because Google Forms has gone through a lot of changes. These are probably about 2.5 years old now, these particular webinars. Used to be that if you were using Google Forms to do an assessment, you needed to use an additional tool called Flubaroo. That was an add-on for Google Sheets that would allow you to grade the responses as they got submitted by the students. And you can still do that. You absolutely can still use Flubaroo. It's a great tool. However, over the last year, Google has made some massive updates to Google Forms that allows you now to grade quizzes right inside of Google Forms without the need of having an additional tool. And since that came out, basically it was about a year and a few months ago, they've continually added new tweaks to that to make it more powerful all the time. So I realized it was time to revisit this topic. And so that's what we're doing here today. We're going to go through the topic of creating online assessments with Google Forms, but using the new version of Google Forms with the quiz feature built into it. And even if you've used it before, I'm betting you're going to pick up some neat tips and tricks today you might not have known. As I said, Google's constantly releasing new things, and they've actually snuck out a couple of new updates even in the last few days that I will be including in this webinar here today. Fantastic. As far as what you need for this session, basically, as long as you've got a Gmail account or a G Suite account, you're good to go. Now, be helpful to have a general understanding of forms. But if you've never used forms before, that's okay. We're going to start at square one and work our way up. So let's get into it and get started. So like I said at first, we will very briefly just mention the benefits of online assessment. So why are we doing this in the first place? Why create online quizzes? Well, there are so many good reasons for doing so. Just a few to bullet point out real quick for you. Obviously getting quicker feedback, the fact that it is auto-graded for you, that you don't have to go in and take home a stack of papers and a red pen and grade them while you're sitting on the couch watching TV. Boom, you get the results right away. And that also means more frequent assessments can be given because there's not as much time spent in doing the recording. Students get immediate feedback, you get immediate feedback, and so you can do these more often. It's a little bit easier to analyze the results because it's already digital. So if you're looking for bar graphs or pie charts or item analysis, having it digital is fantastic. It's good to help our students prepare for online standardized tests that they may be taking, which is very common in most states. Another nice thing about online assessments using a digital assessment tool is the ability to use multimedia in there. Rather than on paper and pencil, we can include videos and other multimedia elements. A few other things that are nice about going digital with your quizzes: the ability to collaborate and share with others. You make a cool quiz, you can share it with your colleagues and they can use it, or you can work together to build a collaborative quiz. Other things, easy to edit in the future. You need to make some changes, no problem at all. Just go in and add a new question or move one around or make a change to it. Something that sometimes gets overlooked, I think is important to note, and we'll take a look at this today, is the benefit of using assistive technology when you are using an online assessment. So, for example, having a quiz read aloud to a student. We'll take a look at how you can do that if you're using a digital tool like Google Forms. It's great also that most of these work on pretty much any device. So whether they're on a Chromebook or a Mac or a PC or a phone or a tablet, for the most part, students should be able to take online assessments on pretty much any device. And of course, we want to be green, so saving paper and printing is always a benefit. So there's a lot of good reasons to do online assessments. Now, there are a lot of tools out there that will let you make online assessments. And Google Forms is just one of those tools. I mean, you've got things like Kahoot and Quizzes and Socrative and Go Formative and on and on and on down the line. Those are fantastic, and I encourage folks to use as many different types of assessment tools as possible. I think that variety really makes it fresh for kids to be able to take assessments using a lot of different tools and not always using the same tool every time. Having said that, Google Forms is definitely a good option for you to consider for your assessments. It's really easy to create quizzes with Google Forms. It provides a wide variety of question types to choose from. It supports images and videos. Again, works on any device, no matter whether they have a phone or a tablet or a Chromebook or a Mac or a PC, they can take a quiz on Google Forms. Google Forms will auto-grade your quizzes for you and, of course, collect together all the data nice and neat for you and even present it in happy little charts and graphs. So you have everything right there for you. All right, so very good. I think that gets us through the introduction. We're going to go ahead and move into the actual building now of the quiz. So what we're going to do is start by heading over to Google Drive. So I'm going to open up a new tab here. And I'm going to head on over to Google Drive because Google Forms is a tool in Google Drive, just like Google Docs and Sheets and Slides. We don't always see it because it's hidden away just a little bit, but we're going to show you where to find that. All right. So inside of Google Drive, what we're going to do is we're going to head up to, let me zoom in just a little bit so it's a little bit bigger to see. There we go. Inside of Google Drive, we're going to head up to the new button in the top left-hand corner. Give a click on that. And from that drop down, you'll see we can create a new Google document or a Google Sheet or a Google slideshow. If you go down to the More option, though, popping off to the side, there is an option for Google Forms. And so it is hidden away just a little bit. We do need to dig for that to get to it, but that is where you will go to create your new Google form. Now, if you would like to follow along today and build one with me, please feel free to. Otherwise, you can just watch as I go through this and create a Google form quiz and show the different options. All right, so we'll go New, More, and Google Forms. And there we go. So if you've never used Google Forms before, this is what it looks like. This is where you're going to build your quiz. Now keep in mind, forms can be used for more than just quizzes. This is also a great tool if you need to create a survey, a questionnaire, a poll, voting, a lot of different things you can use with Google Forms. For those of you that signed up for the webinar today, you filled out a Google form when you were registering for the webinar. So it can definitely be used in a whole lot of different tools besides just using it for quizzes. And for today, though, that's what we'll be doing. And again, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on this just so that it shows up just a little bit larger for us there. And hopefully it's a little bit easier for you guys to see. All right. So first thing first, we need to go ahead and give a title to our quiz. So I'll just call this sample quiz dash webinar for today. Now, this title that shows up here is what the students are going to see when they take the quiz. Now, do notice there is a second spot in the top left-hand corner where it also says untitled form. So putting the title here, this is what the students are going to see. Up here in the top left, if I click up there, that's the title you're going to see in Google Drive. And they can be different. So what you call it in Google Drive, what you see in your listing of files, doesn't have to be exactly the same as what the students see for the title. That's why there are two different spots there for a title. All right. Now below there is a spot for a description. If you want to add that in, you certainly don't have to. I'm not going to put one in here today, but this could be a spot where you have some additional directions for the students as far as, taking the quiz or what content it's going to be covering. Certainly feel free to throw some stuff in there if you want. All right. Next thing, before we actually get into making some questions, we do want to spend a little bit of time taking a look at the settings for this particular quiz. So in the top right-hand corner, there's a bunch of buttons up here, and one of them looks like a gear icon. This is the settings button, and we're going to want to go ahead and give a click on that before we spend too much time starting to build our form, because there's a couple of things we need to consider ahead of time. So I'm going to come up here, give a click on my little gear icon, and you'll see that you get a settings screen that has three tabs: a general tab, a presentation tab, and a quizzes tab. Now, eventually we're going to visit all three of these, but for right now, let's just start with the general tab and talk about a couple of things you'll probably want to consider when you're creating a quiz for your students. Now, one of the things to consider is, do you want to automatically collect your kids' email addresses? Well, I think that's probably a pretty good idea. If you check that box, then it will collect their email address when they fill out the quiz. That way, well, you'll know who's taken the quiz, and it will connect a student to their responses. So chances are that's a pretty typical one you're probably going to want to check for your students. Below there, another thing you may want to consider is to restrict the quiz to only people who are part of your school district. This will not show up if you're using a personal Google account, but if you're using a Google for Education account, a school account, you will have an option there to say, restrict this to users of my school district. Again, I think that's a pretty good one to say you need to be logged into your school account to take this quiz, and we're going to collect your email address automatically. Now, after that, there are a couple of other options below there that you can decide to turn on or off depending upon what you'd like to do. For example, we can say we want to limit to just one response per user. Again, probably makes sense for most quizzes to say that students should only take it once, not take it multiple times. And then at the very bottom, there are some additional boxes that I typically don't check for a quiz, but it would be like, do we want to give students a chance to go back in and edit their responses after they submit it? And do we want them to see a summary of the responses that others have submitted, like to see, how many people have chosen different answers. It wouldn't actually show who chose what, but it would show like bar graphs and pie charts of how frequently the different answers were selected. Typically, I don't see folks choosing those options. So there we go. On the general settings tab, what we would do is probably collect their email address, restrict it to their school, and go ahead and limit them to just one response. All right. Now, before we leave the settings, we're going to skip over presentation for a moment. We're going to jump to the tab called quizzes. And this is something that we need to do, might as well do it now before we even start building the quiz, because what this is going to do is it's going to switch our form from just being a survey into actually being a quiz. Because remember, Google Forms didn't used to do this. This is the new stuff. This is where Google added the ability to turn a Google form into a quiz. So if I come here and I click on make this a quiz, quiz, now what's going to happen is I'll be able to, when I go back to the form here, actually put in an answer key for each of the different questions we create. Now, folks, there are a bunch of options below there, and you're just going to have to decide which ones make the most sense for you. I'm going to leave them as they are for right now, but you can just decide things like, after a student takes the quiz, should they get their grade immediately? Well, if this says immediately after each submission, then as soon as they hit submit on taking the quiz, boom, they'll get a link that says, here's your grade, here's how you did. And you can decide, what will they see? Will you show them which questions they missed? Will you show them the correct answers? Will you show them the point values? You can control that however you would like. Now, some folks say, nah, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over here and say, let the kids take the quiz, and then later on, I will release the scores to them, which basically would send them an email with a link to that same report they would have gotten up here, but you're going to withhold it until maybe all the students are done taking the quiz, or you're going to wait till the end of the day, or you're going to wait till you have gone in and maybe done some tweaking. And we're going to talk about that today as to why you might want to go in and make some adjustments to the grades before you send them out. Well, whatever the case, I'm going to leave it on for now just so you can see what it looks like when a student takes the quiz and gets their results immediately. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save, and we are ready to start building our quiz. So normally I would just head right into creating my first question. And for the most part, that's what we're going to do here today. I will throw out one more little note to consider. If you're from a school district where the students' email addresses don't necessarily reflect who the student is. Maybe their first and last name is not included in it, or it's something that might be confusing. You might want to consider for your first question having something like, what is your name? I certainly could have a question that would be, what is your name? We could put that in as question number 1, and that would be fine. You certainly can do that. Again, if you think just collecting their email address is not going to be clear enough for you to say, well, who is that? I know some of our districts use student ID numbers for their username, and so that would not necessarily reflect who the student is. So you may want to consider adding a question like, what is your name? If that's the case, you obviously don't need to add an answer key for a question like that. You can skip over the answer key portion because there's not a right answer to what your name is. But for today, since I'm going to be using some accounts that I've got here, and they're named in such a way that I can figure out from the email address who they are, I'm just going to go ahead and start instead into our first question. All right, so this quiz is going to have 8 questions, and I've tried to choose them very carefully to demonstrate as many different features of Google Forms as I can. And so we're going to work through all these 8 different questions, and each one's going to be a little different because we're going to be just taking a look at a different option inside of Google Forms for creating quizzes. So for the very first question here, what I'm going to go with is a very simple multiple choice question. This is going to be a math themed quiz, by the way, today. I just went with that as my theme for my questions. And so for my first question on the quiz, I'm simply going to ask, I'm going to say an angle with a measure between 0 and 90 degrees is called what? And at that point, what I need to do is decide what kind of a question this is going to be. And if you look over here to the side, there's a little drop down here where I can choose lots of different question types. Now, having said that, there's only 4 question types that can be auto-graded. So if you want Google Forms to grade it for you, to check your answer key, compare it to the students, and actually give them a grade, you need to choose between short answer, multiple choice, check boxes, and drop down. We're going to look at several of these in our examples here today. You can still use the other ones. You can use paragraph, and we actually will. We'll put one of those in. The point is, it can't auto-grade that for you. You're going to have to go in and put the grade in later, but that's totally fine. You can certainly do that, and that's pretty nifty how that works. For this, though, we're going to stick with multiple choice. So basically, they're going to have options here, and they can choose one of those options. Now, I can come in here and, of course, type each of those in, but I wanted to show you just a quick little trick here. You may already know this, but if not, it's pretty snazzy. Just wanted to show this to you real quick. If you already have your questions typed up somewhere else, like maybe you've got a Google Doc or a Word doc or some assessment tool that can spit out your questions. If you've already got them typed up somewhere and you come in and you copy and paste those into Forms, it is smart enough to realize that each line break is a different answer. So if I come here and I copy my 4 possible answers and I come over here and I paste those in, blurf, it is smart enough to break each of those up on its own line. So, hey, that can save you a little bit of time. Again, if you've already got these things typed up somewhere else, save yourself a little bit of time by just copying and pasting those in. All right, so we've got our question. It's a multiple choice question. We've got our 4 possible answers. Well, a couple other things we want to consider before we move on to our next question is the answer key. We want to come in here and say which one of these is the right answer. Now, this answer key only shows up because up here in the settings, we said, make this a quiz. Now watch what happens. If I turn off make this a quiz, if I don't have it be make this a quiz, take a look at this question now. If I scroll down, there's no answer key option. That's the difference. Having the settings set to make this a quiz, that's what provides us with the ability to add the answer key. All right, so let's go ahead and click on answer key. And what it does now is gives us a spot where we can do 3 things. One is we can put in, how many points is this worth? Well, we're just going to have this be a 1-point question. So we'll put that up to 1 point. Secondly, it gives us a spot to choose what the correct answer is. Well, between 0 and 90, that's an acute angle. And then the last thing it does is it gives us the option to add feedback. Now, you don't have to do this. This is completely optional, but I just want to show you that it exists. The idea is if a student gets a question wrong, maybe you want to give them a little hint about what they could do to improve next time they take this quiz. Say, watch this video or check out this website to get a better understanding of what you missed. So if I come down here and I click on Add Answer Feedback, I can put in feedback for either incorrect or correct answers. So same thing if they get it right, I can just put in feedback about good job. Now keep in mind, this is for everybody. This is not a personalized feedback. Anybody who gets it incorrect would get this feedback. Anybody who gets it correct would get that feedback. So this is like global sort of a comment. So for example, let's say I want to give them a little bit of feedback on this one. So I'll come in here and I'll say for review of the different types of angles, you can watch the video linked here. And let me grab a YouTube link that I've got ahead of time. So I'll come here to the link button and I'll paste this in and I'll add that. It's just a quick little YouTube video on different types of angles. So I could add that in for anytime somebody gets an incorrect answer. When they look at their score, they could now watch that video or visit that web page or do whatever to get additional help to correct themselves for the next time they encounter this topic. I'm going to click Save. And now that has been added in there. Again, that's totally optional. You certainly don't have to do that. I'm only doing it on this first question. I'm not going to do that for all of them, just showing you on this first question how that would work. All right. So those are the 3 things in the answer key. Put in the points, put in what's the correct answer, and optionally, if you want, add some feedback. Now, when you're all done with the answer key for that question, you're going to need to click the link that says Edit Question to pop out of answer key mode back over to the regular edit screen. So click on Edit Question, and now we're back to where we began. So you're going to have to do that for each question. Anytime you add a question, you'll need to hit Answer key, take care of the points and what's the correct answer, and then pop back out over to the regular edit screen. Now, in case you want just a couple more quick little tips before we move off of this question, I will draw your attention to the bottom right-hand corner of the question. There is a slider to make questions required. Probably a good idea. We don't want students skipping questions on a quiz. So this slider forces this to be a required question, so they have to answer that. If you think you're going to be doing that a lot, and pretty much making everything required, there's actually a setting way up in the top right-hand corner of Google Forms that if you go way up to the top right where the 3 dots are, and you click there, you'll get a drop-down menu that includes a preferences section. One of the options in preferences is to say, make questions required by default. So if you do that, then anytime you create a new question, the required will be turned on. Now, you can always turn it off, but it may save you some time or just help you when you forget, because we all do it. we all forget to switch things to required every now and then, and kids just skip over those questions. So I'll go ahead and hit save, and now when I make new questions, they'll be required by default. All right. Last thing on this, as just a final tip or trick for you, is notice how there's a little 3 dots button in the very bottom right of this question. anytime you see the 3 dots button, it typically means there's more options. There's something advanced. There's a little bit more you can do. So usually that means you can skip those kind of things because they're not a basic standard feature. But if you're saying, I want to know what's hidden down there, what else is available, click on them. If you wonder what's there, give a click. So if I come down and click on those 3 dots, you'll see there's a couple of options there, including ability to add a description to the question, to jump to a different section based on the answer. We're not doing anything with that today. But look at this one, shuffle option order. Now that's pretty slick. So if I want, I can choose shuffle option order. And what that means is when a student takes this quiz, the options, the 4 possible answers, will be randomized every time a student takes the quiz. So different students could be sitting next to each other and my top answer is not your top answer. They could be rearranged. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll click shuffle option order, and now that's turned on as well. And there we go. That's question 1. Now, I promise it won't take as long for all 8 of the questions, but we took a little bit more time on the first one just to kind of dig into all the different options that are there. Let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. So how do I make another question now that I got my first one done? Well, that's where this floating toolbar comes in. Over here on the side, you can click on the little plus in the top of that floating toolbar, and that will create a new question for you. So let's give a click. And now we're ready for question 2. Like I said, we're going to do something different with each of the questions. So the first question we did was a standard multiple choice. There's one right answer. Boom, that's it. You're done. Let's try something different. So for our next question, we're going to say, which of the following are quadrilaterals? And we're going to go ahead and put in a couple of answers here. We've got square, rhombus, hexagon, and triangle. Now, in this case, multiple choice isn't going to be the best option because I'm talking about more than one possible answer. Which of the following are quadrilaterals? Well, a square is, and so is a rhombus. The hexagon isn't, the triangle isn't, but there's 2 possible answers here. So in a case like that, what we want to be using are check boxes rather than multiple choice. If you choose check boxes allows students to choose more than one answer from the answers provided. All right. Other than that, everything else pretty much the same. We've got our question. We make them into check boxes. Go down to the answer key. Say, how many points is it? Well, there's 2 possible answers. Let's make it worth 2 points. We'll say it's a 2-point question. And then I need to select the 2 that are correct, square and rhombus, so that those are marked as the correct answer. I will not add feedback on the rest of these. You already saw how to do that. We'll just skip that for the rest of the questions. And that's it. Let's go ahead and click Edit Question to pop back over. And now you'll see we have a checkbox question where square and rhombus are the 2 correct answers, and it is a 2-point question. Again, I probably would randomize my answers, though, especially in a case like this where the top 2 are both the correct ones. If I come down to my 3 dots and shuffle the option order, now again, those will be randomized for students when they take the quiz. Now, if a student does not get both of these correct, by default, Google Forms will mark it as completely incorrect. So if they only get square or only get rhombus, by default, it does not give them partial credit. It'll just give them a 0 on there. You, though, can go in and manually override that. So we're going to take a look at that. I'll show you how that works when we have some sample quizzes here in just a moment. All right, let's go on to our next question. So let's add another question. And for this one, let's go with something that is a little bit more open-ended. So far, we've kind of guided them through with multiple choice and check boxes. Let's go ahead, and for this one, let's go with a short answer question. So I'm going to the question type and I'm choosing short answer, which means they have to type in their answer. And so my question is, what do you call a 5-sided polygon? And the student would type in their answer there. Okay. So for this one, when I come down to my answer key, I can again set the points. It's worth 1 point. And I can go ahead and type in my correct answer. But here's what's cool about this. And this is one of the new features that just rolled out like 2 days ago. So I know you may be watching this recorded in the future, and so it's not going to be quite as new. But for those that are watching live, like this is a brand new feature. Google Forms now allows you to type in as many correct answers as you want here, and it can match any of those. So for example, a 5-sided polygon is, of course, a pentagon. Well, what if the student spells it differently than that? And what I mean by that is like capitalization. The way it used to be is when somebody filled out a short answer question, it had to match perfectly, like it had to be the exact same case, nothing different about it whatsoever. So like in this case, Pentagon, if you used lowercase here and the students typed in uppercase for the P, it would have marked it wrong. Now you could have gone in and you could have, overridden it later, but that's a lot of work, which just seems kind of silly when the computer should be able to take care of that. And now it can. So now I can put in as many variations as I want. Maybe even I'm worried that a student may put in a pentagon instead of just the word pentagon. You get the idea. I think the example I used in my blog post was if you ask the question, what's the tallest mountain in the world? I mean, they could spell out Mount Everest, or they could use the abbreviation MT for, mountain, MT Everest, or they could just say Everest, or you get the idea. This could also be great if there's just not just variations, but just different answers. Like if I said, name a president who came from Ohio. Well, we've got 8 that came from Ohio. And if I said use the last name, there's 7 different last names. That's 7 possible answers students could type in. And so I could account for all of those. So that is now something that we have as an option we did not used to have, which is pretty slick that we can do that. That is something in the past you had to use Flubaroo for. So if you're an old Flubaroo user, again, love Flubaroo, cannot say enough nice things about it, but you now have that ability to accommodate multiple correct answers in a short answer question. Now, there is a checkbox that I want to draw your attention to at the bottom, which says mark all other answers incorrect. So here's the idea. If they type in what you wrote here, they get the point for sure. What if they don't? What if they don't type in something that matches this exactly? If you check the box, mark all other answers incorrect, that means anything else they type in besides that will get a 0. It'll actually get a 0 assigned to it. If you don't check that, if it doesn't match your list, it'll still be marked wrong, but it won't have a 0. It won't have anything. It'll actually be a blank for the points, which basically means it's waiting for you to decide whether you want to give points to it or not. For today, I'll mark it as being incorrect, but you can still override it. But that's the idea behind that checkbox there. All right, there we go. So it's worth a point. Here's some possible ways we could type in the answer, and we're going to mark the other answers as incorrect if they veer off of those. Let's go ahead and click on the edit question and swing back around. I do see a question about that. Somebody says, on adding correct answers on a short answer, does it truncate after the answer so that a trailing space doesn't give a false? I believe the trailing space would give a false, but we just need to poke a stick at it. So try to not let me forget that. When I go to take, because I'm going to use some test users to take the quiz in a bit, I'll do that. I'll put a space after Pentagon and let's see what it does. That's a good question. I really wasn't sure about that. My gut reaction is it's going to mark it wrong. It's going to treat a trailing space as part of the answer and it'll mark that as wrong, but we'll see. All right, let's keep going. Question number 4. So for the next question, we're going to now talk about images. So up till now, everything we have done have been text questions. So just, answer this question, multiple choice, check boxes, fill it in. But remember, I said, hey, we can use multimedia. This doesn't have to be just text questions. So let's do this. Let me grab this question and paste it in. And the question is going to be, what type of triangle is shown in the diagram below? And we'll give 3 options here. We'll have isosceles, scalene, and right. So in a case like this sort of a question, I need a picture for the students to look at. So to do that, it used to be you had to go to the floating toolbar and you had to use the add image button. Now that was fine, that was cool, but what it did was it added an image that was not inside of the question. It added an image that was free floating separate from the question, and that could become an issue, especially if you use another cool feature we'll look at, which is shuffling the questions. Unfortunately, it would shuffle the image away from the question, and it's like, oops, the picture's not with the question anymore. So what's nice now is if you take your mouse and simply hover it above the question, you'll notice that same icon pops up right next to the question. So don't use the one in the floating toolbar for this type of a question. Instead, type in your question and then click the little icon to the right of the question that looks like the little mountain range. And now go ahead and add an image, and that one will actually be inside of the question. It won't be separate from it. So I'm just going to go ahead and search. We're going to do an isosceles triangle. So let's just run a search for an isosceles triangle. And probably any of these will be fine. We'll just go with this first one and see if it likes that one. If that's a happy image, yes, it is. It's pretty big. So we're going to click on that and shrink that buddy up. That is a little bit large there, but no problem. You can just click on it and shrink it up. So there we have our picture of our isosceles triangle. And now we need to go to the answer key, make it worth 1 point, choose isosceles, and go back to edit the question. And we're good to go. Oh, and if we want to shuffle the option order, you can randomize the answers too. That's fine. All right, so that's adding a picture in the question. Well, another cool thing we can do, let's add a new question below that, is we can also add images in for the answers. So let's say I say which angle below is an obtuse angle. So instead of just having a single picture that they're answering and choosing the correct answer for, let's put in 4 separate pictures and have them choose which image is the obtuse angle. So how does that work? Well, basically, just like you can hover above the question and get a little image icon popping off to the side, you can also hover above the answers. And for each answer, there's a little image icon that pops over to the side. So if I hover above option 1 and click the little image icon, what I can do is I can run a search for each of the different types of angles. So let's find an acute angle. And well, any of these will probably be fine here. We'll just, we'll grab this one as an example. Drop that in. There we go. And then we come down to add option. And for option 2, we'll click the image button again. And this time let's find an obtuse angle. And of course, now guys, I don't have to run a search. It's just faster this way. I could upload. So if I have found a picture somewhere else and I've saved it, I could upload the picture. If I've got pictures on my drive, if I'm using my webcam to take a snapshot, I'm just using the search feature just because it's pretty quick and it's a quick way to go ahead and find an image out there that should match what we're looking for here. I think I'll actually put an angle with it. That may make it a little bit easier to find an example. Yeah, that's pretty good. We'll just go with one of these here. Well, that guy looks like a decent one. We'll see if it likes that one. Yep, there we go. And we'll come down to add option, and let's go ahead and let's do a right angle. That should be fine. And we'll do one more. Go to add option, click the little picture button to the right, and let's do a straight angle. And for that one, we'll go with that picture. And so now what I've got are 4 separate images, and the student can look through those and pick out which one is the obtuse angle. Now again, you need to go to the answer key, make it worth a point, and choose which one is right. In this case, option 2 is the correct answer. And we're good to go. All right. Told you we'd be making some pretty good time. All right. Now, there was a question I saw pop up that says, can we make the image search to restrict to public domain to avoid copyright issues? Hey, guys, that's the good news. It already is. Should have mentioned that. Thanks for bringing that up. But when you click on that image button, you go to the search. It's really fine print, so I don't expect you to be able to read it over the webinar screen, but it says results shown are labeled for commercial reuse with modification. So it is already limiting the search to only things that are allowed to be reused. These are not copywritten images. So you're in good shape. That is built into the search feature already. So thanks for asking that. Very good. And again, I apologize. I am doing my best to keep my eye on the chat doc while we're doing this, and so every now and then I'll peek over there and see if there's a new question that I might have missed. All right, let's keep on going. Next question. Let's add another question here, and we are up to a question with video. So we just did two image questions, one where the image is in the question, one where the images are the answers. How about something where we want a video to be inside of the quiz? Well, unfortunately, there's no way to put the video inside of the actual question. This one is one that still is going to be separate from it. So we basically make the question first, and then over here on the side, we're going to use the add video button, and we'll have to add a video below the question. So it is one that can create issues if we later on were to shuffle our questions. And again, I'll show you how to do that. Just be aware that would potentially move the video to a different spot of the quiz. But for now, though, let's just go ahead and show you how it works. So we're going to say in the video below, what is the shape of the street signs shown? And we've got a couple of options there. I have a video that has stop signs in it, so they would be octagons. So let's go to the answer key. We'll make it worth 1 point. We'll choose octagon as the correct answer. And we'll go ahead and randomize those answers. Now, what we need to do to add the video in is use the floating toolbar and click on the Add Video button. It's a little YouTube-looking button there on the side. And now, I've already found this video earlier, but of course, you could just run a search for it. I'm just going to paste the address in there and select that video. And now that video gets dropped below that question. You can click on it, make it bigger, smaller, whatever you might need to. And so when the student takes the quiz, they'll have the question, but below they can hit the play button to play the video. Now, this can be really useful for a language arts test where you want students to be able to watch a video clip, be able to scrub through it to find a certain spot in the video, and then answer comprehension questions on it. That closely mirrors what we see a lot of times in the state standardized online tests. So that's really great practice for them to be able to watch videos and answer questions based on them. All right, down to our final two questions to add to the quiz. Let's go to the plus button again, add another question. And for this one, we're going to say, explain in your own words how to find the perimeter of a rectangle. Now, we're definitely starting to veer a little bit off at this point because this is a very open-ended question. In this case, I want the students to just explain on their own. How do you find the perimeter of a rectangle? So what type of a question is it? Well, it figured it out. It's a paragraph question. Now, remember I told you Google Forms can auto-grade certain kinds of questions: short answer, multiple choice, check boxes, and drop down. Paragraph, though, it can't auto-grade. So it's not going to be able to assess, did the student type in a reasonable explanation for finding the perimeter of a rectangle? That doesn't mean you can't use it in the quiz, though. Basically, what it means is, here's the question. It's a paragraph question. You're still going to go to the answer key, and you're still going to put in how many points it's worth. Let's say, oh, that's a 2-point question. The point is you can't put in what is the correct answer. It's going to be up to you. After the students submit the quiz, you're going to have to go in and assign the points to them, but you can have it worth 2 points. And then basically Google Forms is just going to be waiting for you to put the scores in later. And we'll show you how that works. All right. And one last question. This will be the final question we add to the quiz. What about extra credit? Can you do an extra credit question? Sure, why not? So let's do one, which is how many degrees are in a triangle? Let's make that a short answer question. We'll have the student actually type in their answer. So when we go to the answer key, we will say 180 is the correct answer, 180 degrees. Now, because we're going to make this be a bonus question, how would you do that? Well, there's no box to check to say this is extra credit. All you really have to do is leave it at 0 points. Don't make it worth any points. Now, yes, that means you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to actually give them a point for that question, but you can do that. It's a bit of clicking, certainly, but that is an option. It's kind of a workaround for now, so there's not like an official extra credit option built in, but if you say it's worth 0 points and they get it right, you can award them 1 point out of 0, which basically gives them the extra credit. So we'll see that after we take the quiz here in a second. All right. Now, if you're concerned about them, again, having varieties, you could, of course, account for lots of different varieties here, 180 degrees or 180 or spelled out with the letters. Or one thing you could do is you can always come back over to those three dots. And remember, we said the three dots give you the option to do a bunch of things, and one of them is to add a description. You could say, I want to add a description to this one and say something like, only use, numbers or something like that. So they know just to type in numbers and nothing else. Now, that is an option for you. Oh, and because that's extra credit, we don't have to make that one required. That one we could turn off because they don't have to take that particular question if they're not sure. So, but again, that's up to you. It wouldn't hurt either way because it's worth 0 points. It is not going to harm them in any way if you don't make that required. All right, so those are the 8 questions that I'm using for my sample quiz here today. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk about some final settings to tweak, and then we're going to talk about sending it out to the kids. How do we get the quiz out to them? Then I'm going to take the quiz real quick as a couple of quick test users, and then we'll finally see what it looks like to then look at the results from an online quiz. Taking a quick look over here to the side again to see if we have any questions that we have not addressed yet. Oh, somebody says you're going to start a fight by offering extra credit. So I do not mean to to make any I'm not taking a stand on extra credit in this particular webinar, although I am very passionate about extra credit being something that if it is ever used, it has to be something that is directly tied to the content that you are teaching and kind of stretches the students and goes above and beyond. We've definitely had a lot of discussions about things like, bringing in Kleenex to school can't be for extra credit. You're right. That's a whole other discussion. We will avoid that here today. All right. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and now talk about a couple of other quick settings before we send this quiz off to the kids. So one thing you might want to consider if you scroll way back up to the top here is whether you want to change the theme, the color scheme for the quiz. By default, this one's kind of purpley blue. There is a palette button up here. If you give a click on the palette button, you can choose other colors. You can also choose images. If you want to browse for an interesting theme, a jelly bean quiz, you can have a jelly bean quiz if you want a jelly bean quiz. That's totally fine. Now, one reason you might want to consider doing something like this would be, let's say you want to make sure everybody is staying on the actual quiz and they're not jumping out to another website, looking up the answers. If you have a brightly colored theme, it makes it a little easier for you if you're walking around the room to be able to see the student screens and go, yep, everybody's got a bright yellow background or a bright pink background or whatever, works. That would be an option. Now, having said that, there's a whole other giant discussion. I know we're kind of, bringing up some interesting topics here, but the idea of cheating when you go digital. Yes, absolutely. When you go digital, it opens up the possibilities for academic integrity issues. It opens up the possibility for cheating and sharing answers. It certainly does. Google Forms and other things don't take the cheating issue away. In fact, they open up other ways it could be done. At the same time, though, they open up a lot of ways for you to also monitor and check on things because Google Forms tracks everything. And so I actually have a whole separate webinar. If you are interested in that, just check the archives, and there's a webinar on addressing academic integrity issues. Addressing cheating in Google Apps. So there are some, hopefully helpful ideas in that one. All right. And so the last setting we're going to mention, and I've said it a couple of times, I just wanted to show it to you, is if you wanted to, you could also shuffle all of the questions so they are in a different order than they're showing up here. Each time a student takes the quiz, they get the questions in a different order. To do that, you go back up to the gear in the top right, and it's actually the tab called Presentation. On the Presentation tab, there is a Shuffle Question Order option. If you check that, every time somebody takes the quiz, the questions will be rearranged. Now, I'm not going to do that today just because I do have that video that would get kind of moved around because the video is not actually attached to the question. That's at the moment the only pain point you get with that. Now, if you're not using free-floating videos like that, though, absolutely feel free to use the shuffle question option. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about sending this out to the kids. So we've got the form done, everything's ready to go, time to get it out to the kiddos. So how do you do that? Well, you got several options here. One option is to go up to the send button in the top right-hand corner, give a click on that. And when you do that, there's an option to email it or to get a link to it. If you use the email option, we'd basically have to put in the students' email addresses or use a Google group or an address book group to, boom, send it out to all of them at once. That is certainly fine. There's also the option in the send form window to go to the link button, which gives you a link to the form. Now, this link is not anything magical. It's actually a link you can get another way. If you had noticed, there is a big eyeball button up here in the top right-hand corner of your form. That's to let you preview the form at any time you want to click on that and take a look at how your form looks to see what the students are going to see. You can always preview it. Well, guess what? That address up in the top in the URL bar, that's the exact same link. So you can get to it either way. You can either use the send button, go to the link button, and copy the link from there, or you can certainly use the eyeball button and copy the link up there. Either way is totally fine. The point is, what you could do is you could take that link then and share that link with the students. You could post it on your website, or you could put it in a Google Doc that they all have access to. Whatever or if you use an LMS like Schoology or Canvas or Moodle, you could throw it into your LMS and say, hey guys, go to the Schoology class page, and I just added a link there to our quiz for today. Now there's a third option, and that's what I'm going to use today. The option I'm going to use to show pushing out a quiz, I'm actually going to use Google Classroom for this. Now, the reason I'm doing that is mostly because it's a new option, that not to add it to Classroom, but there's a new option that allows you to actually import the scores after the kids take the quiz. So that's a relatively new feature just in the last month that Google has rolled out. So I thought I would demonstrate that today. So for the third option, rather than emailing it or rather than just copying the link, let's say I go to Google Classroom, and I'm just using an old demo classroom here from a different webinar. Let's say I want to go ahead and send this out to the students. What I would do from Google Classroom, I'll zoom in just a bit so we can actually see this a little bit better here. Let me make that just a little bit larger for you guys. There we go. So if I come down here to my plus button and I say, let's create an assignment, what I can do is I can put in something like webinar quiz, just so I know which one this is. And then what I would do when I create the assignment for my students is I would not use the link button. So we're not going to copy the link from the quiz and paste it in here. That's not what we're doing. We're going to use the Google Drive button because this quiz is sitting on my Google Drive. That's where it's at. It's in my Google Drive. So from Google Classroom, I'm going to click on the Google Drive button, and I'm going to grab my quiz from the list. And there it is, sample quiz -webinar. And I'm going to add that quiz. Now, what's really cool, this is the new feature that just got added recently. Notice there's a little slider below there that says enable grade importing. So after the students take the quiz and it gets graded, we can suck those grades right into Classroom so we don't have to double enter them. We don't have to copy them and type them in ourselves into Classroom. It'll actually pull them right into Classroom for us. So there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and assign that. So we've got webinar quiz. We've attached it from Drive. We've enabled grade importing. Let's hit assign, and whoosh, that quiz is now being pushed out to my kids. So let's take the quiz. Let's try this out. So here we have, let's grab one of our students, bring them over. This is test user 1. So I've got a couple of test users here, and we'll refresh his screen so we can see what it looks like. There we go. There's his webinar quiz. Now, if the student comes in here and clicks on webinar quiz to open this up, here is his quiz. He can go ahead and give a click on the link, and he's ready to take his quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this quiz a couple of times. I got a couple of different test users, and we'll answer it differently for each of them just so we get a variety of responses in here. So for example, we'll have the student get everything right for the first one here. So he wants to pick an angle between 0 and 90. So that's the acute angle, which are the quadrilaterals, the rhombus, and the square. And the 5-sided polygon, that is going to be our pentagon. The triangle here is an isosceles, which is the obtuse. That's option 2. In the video below, that is an octagon. We could play the video, of course, but we'll just save a little time here. And then here we want to explain in our own words how to find the perimeter of a rectangle. Now, I'm going to throw in just a couple of other little tips and hints for you guys at this point, which is, remember I said earlier, a neat thing about doing online assessments is using technology for assistive purposes. So for example, there are tools out there that will do text-to-speech and speech-to-text. So if I needed this to be read aloud to my student, I could use a tool like Read and Write for Google. Now, this is all linked in below the live video if you'd like to get the links to these resources. But if you come up here, I've got it pre-installed, and I click on Read and Write for Google. This is that floating toolbar that will do text-to-speech. It'll read things aloud. So I'm going to turn up my speaker here for a moment. Sorry if we get any feedback on this, but let's try this. If I come in and I highlight my text, and we go ahead and I hit the play button and Read and Write.
Explain in your own words how to find the perimeter of a rectangle. 2 points.
And so hopefully that was loud enough to hear that. Sorry, I just pulled up my speaker, and I hope that would let you hear that. So using something like Read and Write, that's a free extension for students. It will do text-to-speech for them. They could use that to have the form read aloud to them if they need some assistance with it, which is really nice. Now, another cool extension is this one I've got next to there called Voice in Voice Typing. And what it does is it allows you to do the other direction, speech to text. So I've already got it installed. If I click here and then I click on the Voice in Voice Typing button, or if I right click and choose Start Recording, it'll listen to what I'm saying and I can just dictate to there. So how do you find the perimeter of a rectangle? Well, let's click on this and try it out. You add up all of the sides. And boom, there we go. It has listened to what I said and it typed that in there for me. All right. All right. Final question. How many degrees in a triangle? We'll say 180, and we will submit that. And so now that student has submitted their quiz and it's being auto-graded by Google. Now keep in mind, guys, if I hadn't done extra credit, if I hadn't done an open-ended question, his score would pretty much be done. Now, if he says, hey, I want to view my score, keep in mind, it's not going to be totally accurate yet because there's some pieces to this that I still need to grade. So if he goes, hey, I'm going to view my score, he says, oh, I got 7 out of 9. Why is that? Well, I got that right. I got that right. That's strange. Why did I get 7 out of 9? Hey, it marked me wrong here. Well, that's because that's a paragraph question. It really didn't mark them wrong. It's just waiting for me as the teacher to put in the score there. So that's an important thing to let your kids know. And that's why you might decide in the original settings to not release the scores right away. You may want to release them later so that the students have to wait for you to go in and fill in the missing scores. Now, again, that's if you're doing a quiz with open-ended questions and things like that. You certainly don't have to. I could have set up this quiz where it was just graded and done and over with. All right. Well, let's just do one more student. I'm not going to do a whole bunch of kids here. We'll just do one more student. And for this student, let's grab test user 2 and bring him on over here. And we're going to let him get a few things wrong. So we have got at least a little variety here. And so we'll let him take the quiz. He can get the first one right, but let's have him only get one of the quadrilaterals. We'll just choose square. And for the polygon, let's try what you guys said, where we'll have him do the pentagon and we'll put a space after it. I am curious. I'm wondering if it's going to count that space as being incorrect. We're going to find that out here pretty quick. We'll let him get the scaling correct and the obtuse correct. And the octagon correct. But then we won't have him do the bonus. And for the perimeter one, we'll just go with something different for the perimeter. We'll have him put in this. And actually, we'll miss a couple other ones here. There we go. We'll just throw a little variety in there. Okay, there we go. That's good. And that's it. Let's go ahead and submit his. Now, when he goes to take a look at his score, he got a 3 out of 9. Oh boy. So notice, because he only got the square instead of the square and the rhombus, he got none of the points. Now remember, I can override that myself if I want to, and I'll show you how to do that. Hey, look, it didn't worry about the extra space at the end of Pentagon. I was curious. Now we know. So it ignored the space at the end there and marked that as correct. So cool. Now we know. But the rest of these, some of them we had him intentionally get wrong there. All right. And again, it's waiting for his answer on the one for the perimeter. All right, so now you've seen what it looks like for the students. What does it look like for you as the teacher? So now if I pop back over to my quiz, notice I have a responses tab. And this responses tab is going to now show me how the kids have done. Now, there's only 2 responses. This is not going to be too exciting. Normally, the bar graphs are far more interesting. But notice on the responses tab, there's a summary tab, a question tab, and an individual tab. The summary tab puts it all together and shows me what are the most commonly missed questions, shows me for each question how many times each thing was answered. So you can quickly get bar graphs and pie charts. This is a great way. If you're doing this for a formative assessment, you can tell right away, did they understand that topic? If everybody got it, great. If you look and go, oh my gosh, we have so many students who missed that, now you know you need to reteach that. Now, in addition to that, you can also go to the question tab where you can look at one question at a time. You say, oh, I just want to look at how did people answer the one about the perimeter of a rectangle? I could grade all of those in one fell swoop. I could say, I'm going to grade that one question, and one by one, I'm going to go down the line here. And for each student, I'm going to say how many points they get. So I could say, okay, that's a pretty good answer. 2 times the width. Oh, that's good. That's worth 2 points. How about this one? Okay, that's, also, if you hit the green check, it gives them the maximum value. If you hit the red X, it gives you the minimum value, and you can always use the arrows to set a in-between value like 1 or 2. Okay. Now, anytime you go in and do an auto grading like that yourself, you have to hit the save button to save those changes. In addition to that, if we go over to the individual tab, we can look at each student individually if I just want to look at their individual scores. So for example, my first student did fantastic on all of this, but remember, I threw in an extra credit question that he got right, but it was worth 0 points. I would need to come in, click on that, and actually give him a point for that if I wanted to do extra credit inside of Google Forms. And again, save that amount. Let's pop over to student 2. What's special about him? Well, remember, he's the one with the check boxes that only got square instead of square and rhombus. He got 0 points, even though he got 1 right. Again, you can override that. You can come in and click that up and give him a point, so he gets 1 out of 2 points on that one. And the last thing that you can do besides filling out scores for check boxes and free form questions and extra credit is you can also leave individualized feedback for students. So notice, maybe say, I really like the answer this student gave here for how to find the perimeter of a rectangle. Right below there is a link that says add individualized feedback. I can click there if I want to say something like great explanation and go ahead and save that. Now, don't forget, you got to hit save at the bottom to save all of that. And the last thing you need to do is we need to now release these scores back to the students. Because I've made changes, because I went in and I tweaked and I made some modifications to them, we need to send them the updates to that. So I could do it student by student. It's a lot faster just to do it all at once. So if you go back to the summary tab, and scroll down just a bit, there's a link that says release scores. And so that will go ahead and boom, send all of those updates back out to the students. So now if I pulled student 2 back over here and he had, let's see, what did he have? He had a 3 out of 9. If he refreshes his results, he's got a 6 out of 9 now because I've given him the partial credit on the quadrilaterals question, and I have graded his open-ended question about perimeter. Now, they also will get an email sent to them when you do re-release the scores, so that if they have closed out of the screen and they don't have the report up anymore, they get the exact same link in an email. Now, as I mentioned, I went ahead and pushed this out through Classroom because I thought it'd be a cool way to show you this new option that's in Classroom. Again, absolutely don't have to do this. You could have sent out the form lots of other ways, but if you used Classroom, now that it's done and graded, if I go in, there is now an option in Classroom to import grades. If I give a click on that button, it will pull in those grades and fill it right here into my my grade list over here on the side. It takes it just a moment, but now it is grabbing those grades from, and there they are. And so it's made that be a 9-point quiz, 10 out of 9 and 6 out of 9 for those two students. And of course, I can also return that to them in Classroom as well. And again, you would not have to do that in Classroom, but I just wanted to demonstrate that for you so you could see what that would look like if you did it in Classroom. All right, well, we have gone over by about 5 minutes. I apologize for that, but I'm going to take a quick look over here and see if there was any questions we have not gotten to yet that we still want to address before we wrap this up. Looks pretty good. We were talking about check boxes, short answers. Somebody had asked about creating personalized headers. I am so sorry. I did not have that on the list here today to talk about. We did talk about the themes. You certainly can go up to the palette, come down here and pick a different color or pick a picture. But yes, you are allowed to upload your own photos. There's an option here to upload a photo. You'd have to create that elsewhere or download it from elsewhere. I usually use Google Drawings to create my headers whenever I want to make one. And that's a fun way to do it. But I'm sorry, I did not actually have that on the agenda for us to chat about here today. Let's see, multiple choice. Is it possible to have 2 right answers but scored correctly if either one of those was chosen? That's a good question. I have not tried that before. That would be a neat one to try out. So if I come in here to a multiple choice and I go to answer key, can I choose both acute and obtuse? My guess is that would work, and you wouldn't have, and the student can't choose both because with multiple choice, you can only pick one. And so they should get full credit, whichever one they choose. I have not tried that before. That's pretty snazzy. I think that would be a pretty neat thing to try out. Thanks for asking about that. Let's see, any other questions here? Can you set a timer? No, not really, but there is an add-on you could go with that is called Form Limiter, and Form Limiter will turn a form off at a certain date and time, but it's not like 10 minutes from now. It's not like that. You would have to go in and set the date and time. That's a little beyond what we're going to talk about here today, but it is an add-ons, and it's called Form Limiter. And Form Limiter allows you to go in and set a limit, and that limit can either be the amount of responses or a date and time. So I could say on a certain date at a certain time, I want to turn this form off. And so if you knew exactly when you were going to start the quiz, you could say, okay, it's, at 2:35, it's going to turn off. You could do that. I just thinking it would be great if there was a way that just said, hey, 10 minutes from now, boom, you would actually have to know the exact time, date and time when it needs to stop. Now that, again, a little beyond what I meant to cover here today, but that was one of the webinars we've done in the past. So if you go to the recorded trainings, there is a webinar called Supercharge Google Forms with Add-ons. And that webinar goes into gory details on 9 of my favorite forms add-ons, and Form Limiter is one of them. I demonstrate that in detail in that particular one as well. Let's see. If a student has email turned off, now grades will show up for them if you integrate this with a classroom assignment. Yes, they would see the grades in Classroom. That is correct. If they don't have email to receive the emailed grade, they would see the grade inside of Classroom. Oh, what does the sheet look like for the student responses? Now, again, you don't have to do this, totally up to you if you want to, but when you're all done creating your form and the kids take the quiz, there is still the option, if you want, in the very, very top right-hand corner of the responses tab, there's a little Google Sheets icon. You're allowed to send the responses over to Google Sheets if you would like to do that. You just come up here and you click on the little Google Sheets icon at the top of the responses tab. And it says, would you like to create a spreadsheet? You go, yes, I would. And it goes ahead and builds that spreadsheet for you and dumps the results in there. So you've got a timestamp of when they took the quiz, their email address, the score that they received. I know it's a little hard to see. I will zoom in on that for you. Whoops. Try to make that a little bit bigger for you so you can see it there. The score they received and, of course, their answers that they gave. So it still goes in both places. The results will still be collected in forms. They'll just also sync over to this Google Sheet. So if you like to have them in a Google Sheet because you want to do some more calculations or charts or graphs or sorting or filtering, have at it. That's still a great option for you. It used to be you had to do that. That was the only way to grade. You had to send it to Sheets. You had to run Flubaroo to grade them. Now you don't have to. You can just stay entirely inside of Forms, but feel free to send stuff to Sheets if you would like to. All right. Well, folks, I think I got through most of the questions there. After this is over, I will go back through the Q&A doc and see if I missed something, and I'll type in some responses there. So if there's something I missed, I do apologize for that. But I want to thank you guys so very much for being here today for this. I know we went over by just a little bit, but hopefully it was valuable material that was worth the extra few minutes in there for you. As a reminder to you, all of the session resources can be found at tiny.cc/spark246. That's where you'll find the recorded video. That's where you'll find the session evaluation. And most importantly, that's where you can take the quiz. Yes, a Google Form quiz about a webinar on Google Forms quizzes. Yes, you can take the Google Forms quiz to earn your certificate of attendance for watching this session. Thank you guys again so much for being here today. I would encourage you to keep an eye on our upcoming video webinars. Sign up for our newsletter on the website and connect with me on social media, and you'll hear all about the upcoming webinars. Look forward to continuing to learn with you in the future with other trainings. Thanks again so much. Take care.